Hello, this is Muho in Osaka right now. Most of the stuff I've been doing recently was either in Japanese or in German, but I would like to do a couple of videos in English starting from today. The winter at Antaiji we spent studying. Often it's texts like the Tenzo Kyokun that we study this year, or Gakudo Yojinshu, Chishishingi, practical stuff that has been written by Dogen, old texts. And apart from the Dharma lectures that people give, they also have their personal topic of study, and they're expected to write a report by the end of the winter. This year, one person wrote something about Shobogenzo-zui monkey. Another person wrote about Hachidai Ningaku, which is a chapter of the Shobogenzo, 8 awarenesses of great people, is one possible translation. Another person did study about farming and the possibilities of organic farming in Antaiji. And then there was one report that I found might be interesting also for the readers of our website, maybe the people who watch this on YouTube. The title of the report is My Teacher's House, Shinyu Miyaura and the History of Antaiji in Hyogo, according to Muho Nelke. Shinyu Miyaura is the name of my teacher, and most of the reports, which is by Edward Moore, who gave me permission to use the report for the website. So Edward did 2 extensive interviews with me, and most of the reports consists of an edited version of this interview. There's lots of things that I would have probably expressed in a different way if I had put it in writing. On the other hand, if these interviews had never happened, I doubt that I had ever written it down. And although lots of the stuff in this report I would maybe write down in a different way, it has all come out of my mouth more or less the way Edward put it down. So there's nothing in there that's, well, something that I would not have said. I said all of this stuff. So it's something about the past Antaiji, about my teacher, the relation to my teacher, also about my teacher's teacher. Those of you familiar with the Antaiji website maybe have read the Adult Practice series. That's a series of articles that I started almost right after I became the abbot 17 years ago. Or maybe 16 years ago, around that time in the early 2000s, I started to write this series. At first I thought I had enough material for a year or 2. But then even after a couple of years, more and more topics appeared in my mind that I wanted to cover. At one point I thought I would first have to clarify what Zazen is and how Zazen is practiced. And another topic I wanted to cover is the teacher-student relationship. And when I was in the middle of writing about Zazen, then I broke off writing this series. That was about 10 years ago or so. The reason for breaking off writing the series is first I got a book offer in Germany. So I wrote a German book in which I also used some material from the adult practice series, and I wrote a lot of stuff that I planned to write later in English, but then I never came to write it down in English. And some of this stuff you will now find in the interview. And after the German book offer, I had for a couple of years lots of book offers from Japan, and I tried to respond to most of these offers. So I wrote more than 10 books in less than 10 years. So I was really busy until last year or so. I also wrote 2 more German books, but I didn't have the time for anything more in English. Also, I mean, English is not my native language, as is Japanese, but I found it, well, easier to express myself in German and Japanese. And also, well, the fact that publishers approached me and made me these offers, please can you write a book, it helps the motivation. If somebody tells you, please write something until then and then, it's a lot of pressure, but it's also help that you have an editor that's waiting for the stuff and that's reading through the stuff, and that gives you some feedback. But either way, I never really finished the English part of the adult practice series. And at the end I wrote, I think, 10 parts, something that is called What It Takes to Become a Full-Fledged Soto Monk. And in that series I covered a little bit about the teacher-student relationship. But there's also a lot of stuff that's not in there because it's difficult to write about or also talk about. So I'm really grateful for Edward that he gave me the opportunity to have this interview with him, and that he all put it down in writing, because there's a lot of stuff in there that probably I would have never written down, even if I had had the chance to do it. So I want to give you the chance to read through it. I will put it up onto the website part by part. Today I'm gonna upload the introduction of the paper once more. It's called My Teacher's House. What is meant by My Teacher's House will probably become clear later in the text. Shinryu Miyaura, that's the name of my teacher, and the history of Antaiji in Hyogo. Hyogo is the prefecture that's west of Kyoto or Osaka, where Antaiji moved 40 years ago, before it was located in Kyoto. According to Muho Nölke, that is me. Introduction. The paper is by Edward Moore. Introduction. So all of this stuff that's not a quote from my personal speech is what Edward wrote. By the roadside leading up to the temple he watched over, Shinryu Miyaura was found fatally wounded, face down in the shallows of the mountain's river. Some hours before, the abbot had driven a bulldozer over the bank and was crushed beneath. While the vehicle moved up towards Antaiji, he stumbled a few feet in the other direction before collapsing unconscious. His body was discovered by an American monk. A practitioner at Antaiji for over a year, this monk was with Miyaura shortly before the accident had happened. Miyaura was using the bulldozer to help bring down a guest who stayed at the temple the night before. As it was 14th February, the middle of winter, there was too much snow on the road for a regular car to drive through without assistance. While Miyaura was saying his goodbyes to the guest at the bus stop by the base of the mountain, the American monk was told to go ahead back up to Antaiji, as it would soon be time for the communal bath. After a few hours, He and the other residents realized something was wrong, so they made their way back down the mountain to search for Miaula. One could only imagine the shock of discovering that wreckage and seeing their teacher's broken body amidst the blanket of white covering the landscape. At the hospital at the nearby town of Hamasaka, while the outcome was already obvious, Miaula was declared dead. How he was unable to jump off the bulldozer, a vehicle moving at no more than a walking pace, remains a mystery. Many believed he had a heart attack and lost consciousness at the wheel. Some also thought the accident was alcohol related, as he had a booze-fueled party with a guest the night before. In fact, during the run up to his death, Miaula was drinking heavily on a regular basis. For the winter newsletter sent out that year in 2002, the lunar year of the horse, he had drawn a picture of an intoxicated steed laying down on its side. That year, sake was clearly on his mind. While throughout the whole of his 15-year abbacy, Miaula enjoyed drinking daily, this was usually more as a sort of communal glue. Nothing rivaled a cold beer or whiskey with the other residents in the evenings after zazen. Though as time went on, alcohol became more and more of a solitary activity, often causing him to withdraw to his private quarters. On some days he would be drunk before lunchtime. As with the accident, the reason for Miaula's alcoholism was always up for speculation. But it was clear that he had been on a downward spiral in the run up to his death, and there was something about trying to run a secluded, self-reliant monastery like Antaiji that crushed him. After the confirmation of Miaula's death, his loved ones, as well as old friends from Antaiji, headed to Hamasaka to prepare for the funeral. Among them was his Dharma heir Muho, who had been staying for 6 months in Osaka Castle Park, living in a tent and teaching zazen. That day, Muho had received 2 phone calls. One from an old Antaiji senpai saying that Miaula had been taken to hospital. The second from the previous abbot to inform Muho that his teacher had died. He arrived in Hamasaka at 10 p.m. in shock. Usually in such cases you're in this high, agitated state, says Muho. For the first few hours I was just trying to contact as many people as I could to inform them. It was crazy that it should happen at this time, in this way. I felt sad that I would not sit with him once more in the Hojo room and talk about whatever was on my mind. Although I knew I could never be in my teacher's house and have my teacher in my house, it would have been nice to at least speak from door to door once more. But of course it was clear that wasn't going to happen. Aside from the surprise of Miaula's death, something else was on Muho's mind. Was he to be the next abbot? His reason for leaving Antaiji had been due to a dispute between the former abbot and Miaula the year before in 2001, in which the former came to the temple and tried to force the latter to step down. Watanabe was planning to take over once again, and having formed a close relationship with Muho for the years and feeling too old to run the temple on his own, wanted the young German monk to be his right-hand man. But wishing to remain loyal to his teacher and feeling awkward with the position the former abbot put him in, Muho decided to leave. Returning to Hamasaka that day, 6 months after leaving and without knowing when he would come back, Muho could tell his life was about to change. For me it was the worst timing possible, he says. It felt so good living in the park in Osaka. I had found a new girlfriend, Tomomi, and was sure more people would join my Zazen group in spring. Me and Tomomi had also planned this trip to Thailand that March. The moment I got the call, it was clear that trip wouldn't happen. I was in this spring mode, thinking I would take a trip with this girl, and I thought I could have lived the way I did in Osaka for the rest of my life. Then I get this call and the ground was pulled away from under my feet, but I wasn't falling yet. On the other hand, maybe it was the adrenaline, but I felt that even though I didn't know what was going to happen, it was going to be okay. Somehow I felt that it was just the right thing. There's necessity developing and I had to succumb to it. Over a month after Miyaula's death, the decision was made by Antaji's board, comprised of an old disciple of Kosho Uchiyama's and a lay practitioner who had visited Antaiji in the 1990s, to make Muho abbot. The American monk and the handful of people practicing with Miyaula that year stayed on only until May, the ceremony for the 100th day since his death. Then, after that, left the new abbot on his own to start from scratch. By June, it was only myself, Tomomi, and a new guy that had just arrived, says Muho. After the first 3 years, with a small number of people coming to Antaiji, then leaving, Muho was on his own again. Nobody stayed for more than a year. The pressure was mounting up. In retrospect, he says, I cannot remember so much from this time as it was so stressful. Some 7 years into his abbacy, Muho decided to take a 6-month sabbatical. Now, with 2 children, he decided to visit his relatives in Germany. It was the first time he had returned to his homeland since becoming abbot. And during the time he was at Antaiji for a sabbatical, he was not participating in Sangha life, except for attending the occasional team meeting. At that time, there were only 3 people running the temple by themselves. Eventually, I enforced the 3-year rule, he says. I got more tight, and that helped to stabilize the Sangha. To my surprise, more people came. But in the end, most people didn't pull through with staying for 3 years. Eko is the only one who spent more than 5 years here. There was also this other American guy, but he left. You need people who are willing to commit. You don't need guys who give brilliant Dharma talks, who are good with machinery, if they're gone after 6 months. The lack of long-term practitioners was experienced by both Muho and Miyaula in equal measure. But each abbot chose a different way of dealing with this issue. While Muho took a strict approach to newcomers interested in anything other than a long-term commitment, Miyaula was simply overwhelmed by the problems and suffered internally as a result. In March 2019, Muho named Eko Nakamura as his successor. While Eko is sure to bring a fresh energy to Antaiji, one wonders how she will try to tackle this problem in the future. In the following interview with Muho Nelke, shortly after he retired after 17 years as abbot, I hoped to explore the root of this problem by reflecting on the history of Antaiji in Hyogo and his teacher Shinju Miyaura. So much for today. There are a few small inaccuracies in there. Like it says, the following interview takes place shortly after I retired. To be more accurate, shortly after I announced my retirement. I will retire next year. Yeah, I will get back to you and I will put more onto the homepage. The teacher-student relationship is really important in Zen. It's probably the same in Tibetan Buddhism. you cannot study the Dharma without a teacher. You can't do it on your own. The reason for this is because you have to let go of your ideas. You not only have to question the views out there in the world, what they tell you on the media. You not only have to question your parents and family, and all of the authority, but you have to question yourself. You need a teacher to really thoroughly question yourself, because otherwise you're only questioning yourself to that degree that you want to allow yourself to question yourself. Also, this questioning of yourself will be done with your own yardstick, and you need a teacher to break that yardstick. The problem is the teacher also is only a human being. He's not perfect. Uchiyama writes about that in an important piece that we have on the website in English translation. I will put a link below this, both to the old adult practice series and to the series What It Takes to Become a Full-Fledged Monk, and then also to this paper by Uchiyama Roshi. To you who has decided that you want to become a monk, a very important piece. The teacher is of ultimate importance, but the teacher isn't perfect. So you're in a relationship with a person. You're, in a way, you're dependent. You're dependent on the teacher if you want to study the Dharma. You can't do it without the teacher. But you are in the relationship with a fallible, imperfect human being. So the question is, how do you learn from a person that's not perfect? When you yourself is aiming for perfection, you want to learn the perfect Dharma. You don't want to learn some half-assed thing. But you have to learn from a person, or with the help of a person who's sometimes just a half-assed human being. Okay, so much from my side for today. Please enjoy the piece and look forward to the rest of it.